So in this video, we're going to learn how to parse some variables from the URL in order to be able to build the product page. So remember how right in the beginning I imported the URL module? So this one here, in order to be able to parse variables right off the URL. Okay, so as a first step, let's actually once more log rec.url to the console. And then another thing that I want to log is to actually the result of using url.parse on this URL. So again, parse is to basically parse the variables out of the URL. So something like this. So what we want is id equals 0, right? Because right now, the rec URL is all of this, so this entire URL, and of course, we don't have any route for that. So nothing here in these kind of router that we have here actually matches this entire URL. And so that's why we get page not found. And so that's also why we need to change some stuff here. Okay, so let me parse the URL here so that you can take a look at the result to see what we need to do next. I also need to pass through here into this parse function in order to actually parse the query into an object. So with query, I mean this part here. Okay, so this is called the query string. All right, and so that's what we're effectively parsing, that part from the URL. So restart it. And let's just take a look at the logs that we get. So first is the rec.url, and this is what we were expecting, right? And here is the result of doing url.parse. So we get the query object here, and so here we have a nice object which tells us that ID is 0, right? So that's beautiful. And then right below that, we actually have the second piece that we need, which is just the path name. Okay, so our route is using this path name, so just /product, and then we need to know the query in order to respond accordingly to the ID of 0. So in this case, for example, loading the avocado product, which is the first one, right? But if it was number 2, for example, then loading this broccoli, right? And so this query and this path name is what we're going to use for doing that, okay? So this one we don't need anymore. We also don't want to log anything to the console now, because what we want to do instead is to create two variables called query and path name. And we can do so using ES6 destructuring. Okay, so again, I hope that you are familiar with this syntax here. And this is how it actually works. So this object here, it has a query and path name. And so by using this structuring like this with these exact property names, actually it has to be like this. So with these two exact property names, it will create these two variables, one called query and one called path name, and with exactly the values that we have here. So query will be this one, and path name will be /product in this case. Okay, now all I have to do is to go ahead and replace this here with this one. All right. Let's delete this one, and just to make sure, let's actually log the query to the console in case we are on a product page. Console.log the query object And now we're back to finding the page. And we also have the query, which is ID 0. So perfect. So now we're ready to actually build this page using our template. And that should be very simple, actually way simpler than the overview page, because here we don't have to do any of these crazy loops over here, because there's one simple template. All we have to do is to replace everything. So, as a first step, let's actually figure out which is the product that we want to display. So I'm creating a variable called product, and that will be equal to the data object at the position query.id. Okay, makes sense. So data object is an array, and we will then retrieve the element at the position that's coming from the query ID. So if it's 0, then it's element 0. If it's 2, it is element number 2. Okay, and so this is the simplest way of retrieving an element based on a query string. Now, another thing that we need to do is to get this exact same head here. Okay. And now finally, we simply create our output. So output is simply replace template. And the HTML that we need to pass in is the temp overview, or actually the temp product. And what we pass in is the product. And that's it. Now we just send the output as a result, or as a response actually. And so that's it. So this part here makes sense, right? So again, replace template expects us to put in a template and a product. Okay, so a product is an object with all of these properties. And so that product comes here right from this data object. Okay, so in replace template, we pass in the template product. So this one that we loaded up from the file right in the beginning. And then the product. Yeah, as I mentioned, of course, the one coming from the array. And so that should actually be it. So if the template is correct, then this should be working now. So restarting the server. Let's reload it. And indeed, here we go. So that is great. That makes me really happy when this kind of stuff works like this. Beautiful. Everything is perfect. Also this back button. Oh, that doesn't work. Okay, so we need to change the HTML template here. So where is that? It is in product. And this link here, where is that? Yeah, it points to nowhere basically. And what we want is to go back to overview. Right? Restart the server, reload this page, and now it works. Let's try out one without the organic badge, and indeed, it is not here. Before it was, and now it's gone. And all of this stuff here, of course, is dynamic coming from that JSON file. Yeah, so all of this works. Beautiful. That's really, really great. And our project, we can now say, is actually finished. Just one more small thing that I want to do, which is just to show you some nice thing that we can do. But besides that, our project is working. So congratulations, you just finished your very first really cool looking Node.js project. And it wasn't that hard, right? I mean, some of the things that we did are more like related to JavaScript programming in general, and not so much about Node.js itself, right? So stuff like this here, which was maybe kind of confusing, But again, at the end of the day, that is just regular JavaScript, really, isn't it? So again, the functionality is there. There's just one more small thing that I want to do in the next video. And when you reach that one, I will tell you what that is.